This is willpower.
I feel like, ladies and gentlemen, the man, the myth, the legend, the philosopher king, Peter Crone. Thank you for being on the Willpower podcast here with me.
I appreciate that. I thought you were going to say Austin Powers, but that's a good company to keep either way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Lovely to be here.
I want to open the show. I know you've spoken about your history on some other podcasts, and I just wanted to open the show, given the fact that you are the mind architect, and I see how open your heart is in the ways you work with people, by asking you about the hardest thing you've gone through in your life and how you work to overcome it, and perhaps how it informed your work now.
For sure. I don't know, trying to categorize the hardest thing, there's been a few. I think we all, by virtue of being here in this paradigm, this dimension of suffering, we all go through our forms of adversity. I mean, early on was probably my mum dying was probably the hardest thing when I was 7, because I don't know even if now I would fully comprehend it. Certainly I couldn't as a 7-year-old. And then 10 years later, my dad goes to work and he never comes back because he dies. So now I'm 17 and orphan. So I'd say they were probably quite at the top of the list of hardest things.
Yeah.
But then I think ironically, it was like, I don't know, 10 years later, 11 years later, when I'd sort of fallen in love as best as I comprehended love at that ripe old age of 28, that I probably reconciled those two previous hardest things, because unbeknownst to me, as we all do, I was living in the trauma of those events, which in this case manifested as the fear of loss. So when I fell in love, again, unconsciously, I became the perfect boyfriend as a way of mitigating the fear of her leaving me, which of course life is always orchestrating its way to help us wake up. So it let her go, which was my fear of loss being realized. And then that was a catalyst for my, without sounding too grandiose, my awakening and realizing, whoa, I'd never really actually overcome that deep sadness, and she represented at the time the most valuable thing to me, which was synonymous with the most valuable people, our care providers, our parents. And so I guess that sort of triumvirate of events, they're all interlinked and sort of spoke to the hardest thing at the time, which was just grief, loss, and sheer survival that we all tend to sort of live within. So they were definitely over a period of time, but they were nonetheless interlinked.
Yeah. And we were speaking just before we hit record today about how I've experienced a lot of grief and loss in the last year or so, and the passing of my father and all these things that are interlinked, as you say. My relationship that ended was very the catalyst of things that happened in my childhood, and we see this over and over again. And I wonder what your advice is for people who are listening, who are like, oh, I'm navigating grief, I'm navigating some loss in my life, and the overcoming period or the addressing it, because there's so many ways that we feel like we might be addressing it or navigating the situation, but aren't really facing it head on.
Yeah.
And is there a way to softly walk through those doors?
Yeah, I think there is. I think, there's always in every aspect of life, I think there's at least two ways to look at everything, right? And I'm using the main placeholders that I speak of soul, like your true essence, or ego, your humanity, right? And they're always going to be there, the yin and the yang. And so I think as it relates to grief, loss, we want to make space for the humanity, which is the story of loss, that I have lost something, that I'm missing something. And that requires compassion and kindness and patience and empathy and all the things that humans rely on when we're in a state of grief. But I think once we've held space for that, I think the most powerful way to be able to deal with it and face it is to recognize the truth of life, which is everything is in a state of dynamic change. Like, we've been chatting for less than 10 minutes and we have lost millions of cells, right? And that's the nature of biology. Like, when I studied Ayurveda, one of the things that really hit me as a big epiphany for me at the time is that health is a dynamic state. It's not static, right? We were under the impression that when, I finally get my body fat percentage to what I want, my 6-pack abs are showing, my ass is tight, I've got a good tan. That's when I'm going to be like my best. But guess what? A second later, you're a different person. So I think with regards to understanding the paradigm, this dimension of being human, that what we call loss, which is really the the transition of form is constant. It's inbuilt. And so that's the more philosophical, but also profound, enlightened perspective is like, okay, none of us are going to be free of the experience of loss, but if we can perhaps reframe it in a way that it's inevitable, unavoidable, and an intrinsic part of life, not just as a way of helping us recognize what's really profoundly important to us, but also I think on the flip side to reinforce the beauty of being alive, right? The preciousness of life, because so often we take things for granted. And when you do go through, typically later in life, hopefully, the loss of friends, the loss of parents, the loss of loved ones, it can be a reminder of like, oh, the fragility of being here. And maybe it's an invitation to live a little more fully, love a little deeper,
Yeah.
produce a little bit more in line with your dreams and your creative powers that perhaps you've been procrastinating on, denying, resisting. So they're the two buckets that I look at is, yes, I feel for everybody who goes through it, and their human experience of sadness, grief, and loss is real. And let's use it as a way to evolve, to mature, to become a little bit perhaps more enlightened in the way that we recognize that, this is all transitory. It's all temporary. And am I going to go, through the motions and sit on my laurels? Am I going to say no to something that my heart is really craving, but I'm just scared? Or am I going to, as I like to do, live full out?
Yeah. And it's what this all is bringing up for me is sort of this notion of like even resting on the laurels and sitting in your grief, because it's been said to me so many times, and you hear this often about, grief takes as long as it takes. Mm-hmm. And I wonder if you prescribe to that exactly, or there's more of a nuance of shifting in the way that you work with people to be able to shift that grief. Like a therapist once said to me, perhaps we need to live on top of the grief for a little while to figure out the way through.
Yeah.
So thoughts on that?
Definitely nuance. I mean, I tend to get really philosophical, as you know. I love that intro. I'd never heard, what have you said, the philosopher king or the king of that's a new moniker. But anyway, so I can wax lyrical about it, but I also want to be very like pragmatic and literal, which is time to me is illusory, right? So I think what happens with all emotions is as humans, we tend to adapt it in a way that from childhood, usually kids are to be seen and not heard as a general kind of container for what children are to parents, which is oftentimes a pain in the ass, right? So, what happens is we become conditioned to perhaps not fully express. My experience when I work with people is if you're given a safe enough arena to fully express, then whatever the emotion is, anger, sadness, grief, frustration, it's instantaneously reconciled. Does that make sense? It's almost like what I call emotional indigestion, right, is what most people are experiencing.
But express it in the outward emotion and whatever that feels like, whether it's like tears or yelling or running through the woods naked or whatever.
Yeah, whatever it is. Because typically it's sort of like the mental equivalent of digestion, and our ability to process is where most people struggle, because just like with their digestive tract, most people don't process. They don't chew their food properly, so the ingestion process, they don't digest properly in terms of the integrity of their gut. They don't absorb properly. Then at the cellular level, they don't metabolize properly. So there's this cascade where they're not able to actually integrate whatever it is they're consuming, right? So now if we take the same formula but apply it to our psychology and our emotional state, most people aren't equipped, through no fault of their own, to truly process whatever's going on. We tend to be reactionary, whether that's like anger and frustration as a protective mechanism, or that's more feminine as a generalization, whereas masculine tends to be more withdrawn and shut down, right? Which is still not processing. It's like one of my expressions you may have heard. I say, can I be with this? Is a question that I will ask. Whatever this is, and obviously the question is most appropriate when it's not something you want, right? Can I be with someone's adoring me and giving me compliments and handing me gifts? Sure, I can be with that all day, right? But can I be with someone who's pointing out a shortcoming, or how I might have done something that offended somebody, or that what I didn't want to happen happened, lost money on the stock market, whatever. So for me, that's where the nuance is, to what degree are you fully capable of completely expressing yourself? And I'm not saying that's easy. Most humans really struggle in that department. Even in an intimate relationship, they could be married to somebody, but they don't feel safe fully saying what they want to say for fear of the ramifications of being in trouble, exploding, maybe the fear of loss, like, oh, well, my last relationship, when I spoke up, they left me, rejection, all of that sort of, the milieu of all of the things that humans fear creates suppression.
Yeah.
So for me, grief, if you understand it, it's really on the continuum of love, right? So it's kind of beautiful because really it's perhaps love that has yet to be expressed.
Yeah.
And that's often sort of very closely correlated to regret, right? Because someone might, I don't know your story, you've shared a little bit kindly, but, with a partner or a parent, to what degree did we feel what I was just speaking to earlier, that we didn't maximize the time that we had here, what I was speaking to, the sort of transitory fragility of what it is to be human. And is there a form of grief? Because, God, I wish I'd told my wife, my husband, my dad, my mom, how much they meant to me and how much I love them. And I didn't, and maybe I did, but it was sort of in passing. I'm like, yeah, see you tomorrow, I love you. It's sort of more surface level.
Yeah.
And so
I opened my father's eulogy by saying, there's never enough time. Like that's the very first thing. Someone once told me there are two types of people in the world, those who have lost a parent or parents and those who have not. Yeah. Because it really shifts your philosophy, your opinion, your thoughts on the way that you construct yourself with time, whatever time is, even though people say, time isn't real or what have you. But this whole piece really, it's landing. It's for sure. It's the response to sort of the micro question in there. For me, when you ask it, is like I think back on my relationship and say, wow, I really disappeared myself a lot in there. Yeah. And wow, this is the thing that at least twice a week comes up. Life will present you with circumstances and people that are going to show you where you're not free. And that, for me, you probably feel like you've said that 100,000 times. And also, thankfully you have, because I think it lands so deeply on people. And it's, for me, it's a state shifting tool, right? I'm going to go to my breath because I do breath work with people and put people in cold plunges and do all that. Yeah. And I use those practices on myself, meditation, what have you. But the state shift moment, the way that you can use that notion to just say, okay, well, this is taking me out of victim. Yes. And making me feel more like, where can I actualize what I do going forward, and how can I feel more wholly myself and own this? And I think we think about the notion of not being free, and it makes us feel like, oh, I want to be free. Yeah. And you see that a lot in the people that you work with. And this whole conversation we're having in this moment right now is also, a great sort of through line to, you speak a lot about, the mind architect, and we talk about our thoughts. And I've done some of your practices and processed them through my body and felt some relief and exhale, and that notion of the power of the pause, of saying, okay, where am I not free here? Yeah. And there is this other notion of, and you're speaking to it a bit, but I'd love to speak to it a little bit more, like the soma, like where it lives in the body, because I can feel better, I want to say temporarily. Yeah. And I know there's a practice here. I know that you would always say there's a practice here about getting, mastery in feeling and thinking through these things. But where does the soma lie in connection with this? Like, how can I unlock the ability to have that relief and then hold on to it more? I think that's for listeners who are listening right now too. They have cathartic moments of tears, or a friend comes by, or they talk it out, and then it sort of becomes like the heroine of how can I feel better? How can I feel better? Or how can I hold on to the shit that wasn't serving me? Yes, or let go of it if it wasn't serving you. Hold on to the relief on the other side of it, from what I hear you're saying. Yeah, so I think, if I were to boil it down to very simple terms and even just use one word, it's safety. Right? To me, that's the primordial necessity in any relationship. And it manifests in different ways. Like, safety to a woman is a different experience in body, mind, and heart than it is for the masculine, right? So, but when we're holding on to things, if you look at it and really, really look at it, like, ultimately any holding is because of fear. What is fear? The antithesis of feeling safe. So typically when people are holding on to anything, in this case, obviously we've focused mostly on grief, but it could be truth, like self-expression, like, somebody does want to end a relationship, but they're so scared because they have kids, or financial
instability or a feeling of insufficiency about what might be next, or they don't want to be alone. Like, so the holding in this case of one's honest experience is, again, like anything, being inhibited by fear. They don't feel safe. And safety often is so collapsed with another person. We put way too much emphasis and demands on the people that are near to us, family, obviously romantic choices, loved ones, even colleagues in a work environment. But really true safety is how I relate to life. Right? You may have heard I often make the joke that despite my mum dying, my dad dying, he did okay. We weren't wealthy by any means. We had a nice house, but it wasn't a luxurious existence as a kid. And then my dad didn't remarry, but a woman came into our life about 5 years after my mum passed. So she was a common law wife. And so everything went to her. So I literally had not a penny, which really pissed off. I have some / biological type, almost family in Belgium. My mum was from Belgium. And they were very angry about the fact that I was literally the only next of kin and only child. And yet everything went to this woman who my dad chose. So I found peace with the fact that it was his decision.
Yeah.
But I would joke that, despite not being left a penny, I'm a trust fund baby because I trust in life.
Yeah.
And that's not always been that categoric for me, for sure. I've had my moments of dipping in and out of fear and, survival, which is the sort of default setting of a human being. Like that's the primordial imperative of every mammal is to make it.
Yeah.
So we're going to be in this state of looking out for perceived threat. So that becomes then the obstacle to full self-expression. So really that was a lot to say on the back of my initial answer of one word, which is safety. Do I feel safe enough to let go of what doesn't serve me, which takes a lot of trust. And
you really have this trust, sorry to interrupt, but you also really have this trust in the present, of course, but the future. Like this notion of the future is made up anyway.
Yeah.
But the way that you stand on the trust of the future is that just practiced over and over again, and you've lived a whole life filled with that richness so that you can...
Not a whole life, don't get me, don't be putting me on a pedestal.
Don't give you that, yeah.
No, I was definitely like a scared kid. And certainly after my parents passed, was forced into the isolation feeling of true survival. And then through college, doing whatever I could to show off and be cool like any 20-something-year-old. And, definitely have fallen short in many relationships where I try to prove myself and my worth and be good enough for a girl. And no, it's all been there.
Yeah.
This is perhaps the last decade
coming out
or
on
two.
the other side, hopefully.
Yeah, it is very liberating. So, yes, trust. It is trust by definition is future-based as a conversation, right? When I work with a lot of athletes, pro athletes, which I do or have and will, one of my favorite lines to them I say is, if you're okay with every outcome, I'm talking to a baseball player, you're going to strike out, we lose a game. Talking to a golfer, you're going to miss the cut. Talking to an Olympic athlete, you don't make the trials, you don't get medals. Whoever it is I'm talking to, if you're okay with every outcome, you've got nothing to fear. So that's a kind of an inquiry and an invitation to understand that most people aren't okay with every outcome, therefore they have something to fear. Therefore, trust can't live in that environment. So I would assert that, yes, the majority of the time, and maybe I slip every now and again because I'm human, but I live in a state of trust because I'm okay with every outcome. Mm-hmm. Jack Nicklaus, the greatest golfer of all time, he said, one of the most important parts of winning is being okay losing. He didn't say I want to lose, he didn't say I'm focused on losing, but I'm okay that is part of the realm of all possibilities and outcomes. If I integrate that as a possibility, then I don't have to focus on anymore, which as a professional athlete removes any tension, any control, any manipulation of an outcome, which then typically, especially if it's someone who's done it since they're a kid, pushes them into their unconscious competence and their brilliance because their mind isn't preoccupied with an outcome. So typically then what's ironic is you do better, you win, you hit 4 for 5, you make the cut and you get in the top 10, you get a bronze at whatever it is, because you're not preoccupied with worst case scenarios. So that's where my trust comes from, is that I'm okay with every outcome. Now, I don't want to be flippant. There might be unconscious outcomes I'm not okay with that life will present me with in a week, in a month, in a year, where, I didn't think of that, but now it's instilled a bit more fear, which to me is then an opportunity to find more freedom, right? So that's the life presenting you consistently with these opportunities to discover more freedom.
Yeah.
So that, I hope that answers the question. So
Yeah,
letting
yeah,
go
yeah.
of is really what's the prerequisite, and what's required is the feeling of safety. And that's why, the expression, toss pearls before swine, right? Like from the Bible, like meaning in real terms, you don't share your most intimate fears and vulnerabilities with someone who doesn't give a shit about you. You want to hopefully have a good friend, a confidant, a lover, a parent, a sibling who really cares about you and can hold a container for you to share whatever's there. Because typically in the sharing, like I said earlier, if you really express fully, then it reconciles itself. I make the distinction between feelings and emotions. Feelings are part of being a sentient being. They're very instantaneous, they're responsive, they're in present time. But when we don't have our feelings in the moment, it's unreconciled. There's a little bit of accumulation. Even if we express ourselves 95%, that 5% will then become sticky. And then that will lead to the next part of a very similar encounter where we don't express ourselves again. And now it's 15%. And then before you know it, in a week or 3 weeks or a month, you have an explosion, which is not really appropriate to the event, but it's because of the unexpressed feelings.
Yeah. And there's all this, the conversation too around the notion, I talk about this a lot on the podcast, but the notion about how our body is somatically, we're taking in, our nervous system is taking in all of these things every 200th of a millisecond. And the combination of 50 or 100 of those are giving us the emotion or the feeling or the way we want to express. And so I think there's also a notion of, we're expressing in the biggest way we can, but there's a moment in the shower later where something else is coming up that we didn't feel like we fully got that out.
Yeah.
And so what you're saying is those things are getting stickier with each other over time, and then if we're not clearing those consistently. Exactly.
And in Ayurveda, to bring it back to your point about soma and the body, like the body to me is kind of like the canvas upon which we get to experience, right? So if you imagine the analogy of a projector in a cinema, the only reason we get to see what is in front of the projector, in this case, the 35 millimeter film, is because there's a wall or a screen. Imagine that it was a sort of three-sided cinema that was open. You'd never see the film because it's just sort of out there infinitely. And so to me, the body represents the wall and the screen, because otherwise we wouldn't have the feeling, right? So it's the tapestry, the canvas upon which, the old expression, the body keeps score. So it all goes there. And that's where we get to feel like the tension in our solar plexus, our stomach, the headache, the change of posture, the dryness of a mouth, the shaking of a hand, the sweats when people are doing public speaking. This is where we get to see, how am I relating to life, which is why the body's so beautiful. Something that came to mind, as you're speaking with regards to like that body experience, the visceral experience, is that if we don't process things properly through the lens of Ayurveda, when we look at food, there's a substance we call AMA, A-M-A, which really points to undigested food matter. So if someone eats too much, too heavy, too rich, and particularly if they have a weak constitution, their digestion isn't very strong, then it's almost like a fireplace where, okay, you burn 80% of the wood, but then there's that sort of charred, wood that didn't get actually eaten up by the flames. That's what we call AMA in our system, and that's what creates disease, or is a precursor, because it blocks the channels. So it's like a sticky goo. If anyone does tongue scraping, without getting into anything that people feel gross, great.
It's like,
but you
what's
see
going
like
on there?
that coating, right?
Yeah.
That coating is what we call AMA, sort of white, sticky. It can almost look like a little bit of a dry version of mucus or whatever. But in the body, that becomes, the obstacle to otherwise natural flow, whether it's digestion at the bigger, gross level, or the subtler level, the channels in our mind, the circulatory system, our lymph, all of that.
Yeah.
And so when things aren't flowing properly, you create disease. So why I'm bringing that up as a correlate to the fact that when we don't process emotions properly, we get this sticky, unexpressed version of ourselves. And so it still comes down to our ability to process, digest, metabolize, express, and then ultimately, again, discard.
Yeah,
right?
Which is the hope.
For people who aren't letting go
Yeah.
of their waste products, they're going to get sick. If people aren't letting go of their waste emotions, they're also going to get sick, right? So there's a beautiful correlation when you understand that the physical, the manifest, is super related to what's going on also at the subtle body, which is why I love the term dis-ease, right? When people are in a state of dis-ease, meaning they're not at peace, they're not at peace, they don't feel safe, they're in a state of fear. If you're in a state of fear, you're in fight or flight, you don't process properly, therefore you don't digest properly, therefore you're going to get sick, which is called disease, right? Yeah. So if you understand that cascade, it's super powerful.
It's
so
really
it really comes
spectrum,
down to do whatever you can to break free, which is why my main product is freedom, so that you're completely at peace. Life is awesome no matter what. It's not that you want the circumstances, but you can be with them, you can handle them. And then hopefully you live a life of vitality and everything's hunky-dory.
Yeah, hopefully.
It's really simple.
It's just really easy. But if somebody's listening to this and saying like, how do I start? I mean, number one, you have a number of resources for people to start with. Even just like downloading the, it's like simple yet effective. You have like an 11 email sequence that's like free courses and things for people to start to get to know your work. Looking at finances and abundance and money and love and grief and heartache and anxiety. It's like amazing. And so there's so many resources for people to be able to dive into with your work. And if someone's listening right now, and I wonder if this is like, it's so interesting when you talk about the work you've done with athletes, professional and other types of athletes of life. I wonder, it's like, I've had the beautiful opportunity to work with like a UFC fighter, an Olympic skater, and all of this where I will even have initially walked in feeling like I might as well have 2 pigtails and a lollipop with this MMA fighter, because what do I know about MMA? And then very quickly, because I'm working in the realm of breath and cold, very quickly realize, oh, no one in this room except maybe one guy of 38 people that are grappling actually knows how to breathe well, right? There's keys that will unlock the doors, and the notion of, practicing to just make 1% change, because 1% change in sport specifically can, the difference between putting, a win or a loss on the board.
Absolutely.
But when you're working with the athletes or executives or some of these high performers, is there something that someone who's listening now that's not that level of athlete or high performer at this point yet can do that's like an initial like stepping through the doorway, a practice? Is this where visualization might come in? Is this
I mean, I'm not against visualization. Everything ultimately is a form of visualization. Like going back to the comment about the future, like everybody's visualizing a future. Like, I tell a distinction that's very profound when you get it. I say most people's future isn't created, it's remembered. And when people really get it, I'm not saying like, the whole conversation between free will or destiny, like it's remembered, it was going to happen. Like that's a good philosophical conversation. I'm talking about the remembrance because your future is filled with all the things you're trying to avoid from your history, which is the self-fulfilling prophecy of self-sabotage, right? So when people see that, like, oh shit, I'm not actually stepping into anything new. I'm trying to avoid that which hurt me in my history.
And I'm just proliferating that over and over and over again until I learn the lesson.
Yeah, so when one of my quotes again, I say past hurt informs future fear, right? So we, with our brain designed to predict and protect as mammals trying to survive, it makes sense. It's a great piece of equipment for survival. It's not a great piece of equipment for loving life and accessing potential, because you're just trying to mitigate and offset, past trials and tribulations, which means typically you are maybe getting the better version of them, but you're still, what you resist persists. So people are like, why the hell do I keep attracting the same kind of person? Well, you're the consistent theme with the same programming. So with regards to the average athlete at home, to your question, my quote that you've already referenced is the best place to start. The life will present you with people and circumstances to reveal where you're not free. So the question is, where do I not feel free? I'm not talking to my husband about something that really bothers me. I'm not addressing something with my kids. I am lying to my boss. I'm, don't have a good relationship with my mom. Like where have I lost freedom? That's the place to start, because then if you've lost freedom, what you're actually saying at a deeper level subconsciously is I don't feel safe in that arena. And that will be some way that the ego is in a self-righteous way sustaining itself, because I get to be right that, well, no, I can't say that to them. Right. And so,
which is so interesting, because these are the closest people in our lives, and we're telling, there's so many instances, like this is a Burning Man reference, so I don't know if you have a love-hate for Burning Man or not, but.
And neither at this point, I haven't been, but.
You haven't been yet, okay, it's a bucket list item.
Yeah.
So I've been 14 times. I brought my father 3 years before he passed at his request. He was like, it's on my bucket list.
Oh, wow.
Can I come and camp with you? And it's just interesting that you'll meet someone in the middle of this arena, let's call it, or in the middle of the dust, and you will have a conversation with them that might be more forthcoming and more true to who you are for 15 minutes or an hour or however long it is. Sober. I mean, I know there's a lot going on there, but just in your sobriety, in your clarity, in the the beautiful overwhelm that is the experience there. And then you will say, let's have a hug. It was so nice to meet you. You may not even exchange real names. And then you'll walk back into your life or your camp, or then you'll go back home to the default world and you'll be with the most loved people that you have in your sphere. And then we won't speak to them.
Yeah, and it comes back to the same thing, safety, right? Like, why do people on an airplane sit next to a complete stranger similarly have what they consider to be one of the most profound conversations they've had? The profundity of it isn't necessarily because they got really philosophical and enlightened. It was just the feeling of freedom to express. That's why it felt profound, because there's the intimacy, into me see, right? Which is allowing you to say what's there to say in the absence of the fear of the ramifications.
Yeah.
And that's the difference, is that when we have loved ones and we've let them get closer to heart, source, soul, because in that intimacy, a stranger on the street says, hey, asshole, learn how to park. You're like, well, fuck you. You know, it's like, there's nothing really lost. You know, I don't know who that clown is, right? And so, but when it's somebody who says, you know, I think you put on a little bit of weight, honey. And it's like, oof, you know, like, that feels like the safest arena, albeit that's not necessarily how we relate to it, right? Because when you really love someone, then in the ideal scenario, you make space for all of them, which is something I've continued to work on, especially as a man holding space for a woman who, you know, jokingly, I could have 4 girlfriends in a month, right? Depending on which phase of their cycle they're in, right? And when you break that down,
30 different girlfriends in a month, depending on which phase of the cycle. Yeah.
Yes. The bigger phases, of seal and ovulation, follicular, and you know, like that's, I try to educate
And beautiful that you speak to that as well, right? Because I think this is a notion as well that for looking at, you know, male-bodied people and female-bodied people in relationship with each other, whether that be your boss, your coworker, your girlfriend. And certainly we're not speaking always about, you know, I have my period at the workplace, but that is such a beautiful notion to unpack in partnership, especially with couples, because it might just give the breadth of space that someone needs to say, hey, I just want to check in on you. And also like the question of like, what day of your cycle are you on? Can either go really well or really horrifically.
Depending on which
Exactly,
yeah, it's a vicious cycle.
But just having that notion,
no, and
go on, sorry.
That's been an ongoing education for me through, you know, beautiful partners, girlfriends, you know, friends who are girls, whatever it is, and honoring the feminine. But that's the place to look, is where do I not feel free? And typically it is in intimate, close relationships, because there's so much more at stake, right? Like if this is someone that we've declared our love for, maybe we've even had vows and we're going to spend the rest of our lives together through good or bad or whatever people say, there's just a lot more significance in those relationships. And so we don't feel so free. And this, again, to sort of use the correlation with athletes, like a lot of my golfers are like, why can't I just play on the course like I play on the range? You know, sort of being synonymous with on the range, I'm free, I can hit balls. There's no attachment to an outcome. Yeah. So it goes all full circle to what I was saying is if I'm okay with every outcome, then I'm free to express myself. Yeah. And I think it's really, you know, it's appealing to people to be childlike in our nature, right? Like the big epiphany that I spoke to at the beginning of me having this girl leave me, and realizing that I'd never actually fully healed the passing of my parents. The thing that hit me was I was trying to figure it out. The brain is like designed to predict and protect, as I said. So I was like, where is she? Is she dating someone else? Will I see her again? And it's a sort of this desperate, anxious, sometimes functional anxiety that people live with consistently. And I got the answer to all of those questions, which was 3 words. I don't know. I don't know where she is. I don't know if she's dating anyone else. I don't know if I'll see her again. But it was so categorically true, like, because that's the truth. I don't know. I don't know. But what I saw with that is also that we don't know as a species, because the future is uncertain. Life is uncertain, going back again to fragility and the temporary experience that it is to be here. And so when you can live from that place, then the whole nervous system can relax. Because if you're okay with the truth, which is we don't know, the conundrum is, as humans, we want to know. And that's where the suffering comes. Yeah, but life is uncertain. No, I know, but I'm trying to figure it out. Yeah, but you didn't hear what I said. It doesn't matter what you try. And so if we can find peace with not knowing, that's to me where we can stay childlike in the exploration of life. And
like the moment-to-moment pieces
moment
of it.
To moment,
yeah.
We can have our, you know, I'm a busy guy. I've got lots of dreams and aspirations. Had an amazing conversation with the CEO of a big publishing company, you know, yesterday with the things that I'm building and books and stuff. And, you know, these are exciting times, but I don't want to say that, like, I could get hit by a bus next week and none of it happens, right? Like, it's like not my intention and it's not what I'm planning, but being open to all kind of outcomes without an attachment and being at peace with that is, to me, the biggest type of being. In relationships, and going back to the sort of the intimate relationships where we struggle, there's a beautiful expression, which is there's those people that want to know more, which we could say exploration, and I'm in the inquiry of life. And there's those that want to defend what they know. And if you can feel into that, right? Like one is like more childlike. I'm going to explore, like, oh, let's go here. Like, why were you upset? What did I do? Or how could I be better? Like, be open to learning. And there's those that just know, like the stubborn, the self-righteous, the selfish. And so I like to be more childlike. I like to be, okay, like I get a lot of pretty impressive people that come to me for counsel. So we could say, I know a lot, but I'm always the one to tell them, despite how much they're paying me, I don't know. And they're like, well, that was great.
Yeah.
But it leaves, me open to inquiry. It leaves me open to miracles and surprise, and as opposed to just knowing, because the knowing mind is stuck.
Yeah.
So,
and I noticed that in your coursework and stuff too. There's like humor and there's playfulness and there's irony and there's, a bit of joking here and there, which always feels like it's a relatable connection, but also I think part of your practice. And I think this is the other notion I'm wondering about, which is like maybe it's not visualization or meditation. And there's a whole world of people that are Joe Dispenza-ing everything or trying to, or like forcing let's get up in the morning. And that's not a slight on him. I think his work is transformational for so many, the practice, like I get up in the morning, I sit in front of my red light panel or go for a walk, have a meditation, have breath work.
Yeah.
The layering of the practice of my belief in who I am and where I am free or not free and what is coming in the future without you one-on-one coaching me in this moment. I think my default, and not just me, but many people, especially in this like alpha business world we're living in, wanting to, do everything we can within our lives. It's like, am I planning this future? Am I over future casting? Am I trying to force something to happen by like every day, square peg round hole, in the way that I'm designing my day versus feeling more childlike, right? Yeah. Especially with me being in this package, I want to be more in my feminine, more in my divine knowing, more in my softness, more in my, settling in with myself and who I am, so that I can have a bit of the like, the calm in the storm of being a woman.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. And so there's this push and the pull. And I guess what I'm sort of saying is, how can we, if we are doing that in our lives, do that less? Or like, what is the, what are the, where am I missing the boat?
So again, it comes back to, no, it's a great question. And you're obviously very astute to see that, not just generally, but within yourself, is where's the absence of safety? Safety being synonymous with freedom, right? Because if you're safe, you're free to express. So in the survival, the square peg round hole, that sort of like one day, the hamster wheel of life that most people are caught on, the questions to ask is like, what am I scared of? What am I trying to prove? Where am I trying to get to? Right? Because what it's all pointing to is I'm not okay where I am. And if you're not okay where you are, then you're in a state of disease. So of course you're under the impression that what you want is not where you are, but you're always where you are. And so now you start to see the paradox of being human is that we're under the impression that this isn't it. Like,
I'll be happy when,
whether it's the state of my body, the state of my bank account, the state of my relationship, it's not quite perfect, but I'm getting there. It's like, no, you're not. You're always here. It's the way that I respond to that somewhat flippantly, but also profoundly for people to go, oh, shit. If you notice wherever you go, there you are. You're always exactly where you are. The question is, to what degree are you resisting the way life is?
Yeah, that's the question.
That's the question. And that's where life will present you with where you're not free, because what you're saying is I'm not okay with me and where I'm at. And that's because of these deeper subconscious fears, which is insidious and hard to get to. And that's my specialty, is helping people to uncover those, right? So that they can realize, oh, actually, I'm not trying to get anywhere. I'm trying to get away from the discomfort of my own perspective. And if you just get that, if that's all anyone gets from this podcast, that should open up a whole, ball of yarn of like inquiry, right? It's like, holy shit, like, yeah, I'm not trying to get somewhere. I'm trying to get away from the discomfort, which is a byproduct of the way that I relate to life, which is typically because of these unconscious patterns that got formulated or triggered in childhood. It's not because of dad having an anger issue or drinking too much. It's not because of your parents getting divorced. that might have been the catalyst to turn on the feeling of I'm not safe, I'm not wanted, I'm not loved. But that's your soul's incarnation's opportunity, is to see that. Life will present you to see, oh, wherever I go, I feel like I'm not enough. Well,
maybe that's me.
maybe you're the consistent like holder and proponent of that story, and life is just mirroring it until you get over it and see, oh, where am I going to find not good enough in you? It's a conversation, you know, and that's when it gets really profound. And I tell people, you're just being stopped by words.
Yeah,
and they're like,
I know. Tried to cut me open and look for the Bayshore, New York tag that says I'm not good enough. I'm not there yet, but I can't find it.
You've heard that.
I can't find it.
No, because it's not there. Maybe did you look behind your kidneys?
No, I know. It's so crazy.
Yeah, but it defines us, and so. As I said earlier, there's people that want to know more and there's people that want to defend what they know, right? So we defend sort of almost to the death, quite literally, figuratively, and behaviorally, what we know about ourselves as the subconscious identity, right? I'm not good enough, I'm not loved. I'll show you that I can fuck things up, right? I literally had a golfer who would explode or self-implode, you know, because he was really, what he was proving is not his talent and his desire to win, but that he could fuck things up.
Like he's proving his story over and over.
That's
again.
all humans are doing. I will be right about my shortcomings in everything. Then you wonder why people need to fucking drink. It's It's an insane asylum in there, you know? That's the only prison. That's why where we met in the Biohacking conference in Austin, you know, my talk was so well received, albeit, you know, I could have argued that there was a bit of fear because Dave, you know, running it, it's become a bit of a trade show. There's all of these products and things that are apparently like, you know, the elixir for life, and this is a miracle. And listen, I've got some of the toys. I'm not going to deny that. But my whole speech, I started with, you know, I said, look, you can buy everything out there. It's not going to make a difference. You can't access genuine health until you free your mind. That's for me, categoric, end of story. That's where you got to start. So whatever anyone's dealing with as a health issue, they might not be a biohacker, they may not give a shit, they might not know what a hyperbaric chamber is, they don't know what red light is, I will look at the sun, you know. But if they're dealing with something, I promise you they're in a prison in their mind. And that's why I love what I do, because whether I'm working with people who have organic chefs, private trainers, you know, they've got like a cryogenic chamber in their house, a private gym, it doesn't matter. If they still think that who they are is fundamentally not going to be okay because their dad had a heart attack when they're young and they're living in this perpetual state of fear, they're going to be sick, right?
Yeah.
So that's why for me, before you spend, you know, thousands of dollars on equipment, self-plug, you know, try $29 a month for my membership platform of freedom and find some relief that way, you know?
Yeah.
So
yeah, and that's you preemptively got to the question I had, which is where are the biohackers missing the mark? And there's for the early years when I was speaking at the Biohacking conference, they'd have me come in and speak about like weight training. And now I have personal training certifications in my background, but that's not my highest level of expertise. And it was just a notion that's similar to what you're saying in some way, which is the biohackers being like, well, this woman's here in our community. And back then it was mostly men.
Yeah.
Could you just speak about weight training and movement? Because, and I was like, they don't even know who to go to ask as the expert necessarily. Not that I didn't do a great job, just because movement and pushing weight or doing that, which I think is a basic fundamental of everyday moving energy and feeling better and all of that, health, wasn't even being talked about in the beginning. It was all about the toys and red light therapy on your testicles and injecting things. And, you know, Ben Greenfield would say all this stuff and women would go, this is too risky for me.
Right,
So it's so beautiful that you can bring this whole landscape to that world of health optimization, biohacking, what have you, and just to humanity in general.
Thank you. Yeah. I
think I know the answer to this question, just as I wrap up a little bit and we get to our little quick fire challenge.
Sure.
But I want people to hear, because you're working with some of the most prolific, high-powered people in the world. Yeah. I want to just one or two things that are coming up for them that people might not actually believe that shows up when you're working with them. Like, are they showing up with inadequacy? Are they showing up with abandonment issues? Are they showing up just like myself and many of these listeners in the world? Are there things that they're challenged by the very same things we are as your average bear?
Identical. Yeah, I mean, that's the basic contents premise of my first book is I reveal the 10 primary prisons of the subconscious that everyone has.
Yeah.
The differentiating factor, I think, between those who seem to be successful, and I say seem because they might have a lot of money and all the things, but success to me is actually what I speak to, which is being free and at peace. Like that to me is success. I don't know how many billionaires I've worked with, but I wouldn't say they're successful. They just have a lot of money. And that obviously does allow for creating a different level of comfort within the realm of suffering, right?
Yeah.
But you're still
Your
in the
chef's
realm of...
still making you meals all day long or what have you, yeah.
You're not fighting with the husband about not taking the trash out and who's going to do the laundry for the kids because someone's doing it for you. So you mitigate some of that kind of tension and frustration and dis-ease. But if internally you're still basically living in the foundation of lack and scarcity and inadequacy and insecurity, the expression I use is you can only become the best version of your limited self. Right. And that's really profound when you get it. So many of the athletes, maybe they have a little bit of a glimpse of more freedom, but oftentimes just through evidence and results, right? So the people that have got a good track record of success, whether it's a team or an individual, we call that confidence, right? So that becomes a little bit self-fulfilling, but it's not necessarily freedom. It's still just I'm sort of relying on the evidence that I still know, but that can also lead to...
Still mindset though. It's still all what's happening in the mind.
And it becomes incredibly destructive when what we think we know and therefore the expectation we have on ourselves doesn't get fulfilled. Now there's even more self-berating or there's even more shame because that past hurt informing future fear, we could also say past success informs future expectation, and suffering is oftentimes just unfulfilled expectation. So, when I'm working with teams, they want to understand, especially in baseball, winning streaks, losing streaks, and why does this happen? And for me, it's sort of, if you look at it very practically, a losing streak is where, to go back to your question earlier, people are holding on to something, right? Like the relief that you experience when you work through something it's the reconciliation and the discarding, even like anatomically, like, when we get rid of some waste products, we normally feel better, hopefully, right? We got rid of stuff, toxins that we don't need in our body. But so if a team loses the first loss, no big deal, that happens in sports. But if you lose twice, then you lose 3 times. Now it's like, oh shit.
Everyone's
right?
like,
So the holding is the obstacle to the freedom of performing, and so that becomes a vicious cycle. Conversely, winning, you got what you want, so there's nothing to hold on to. You don't have to remember what didn't go right. You could learn from it, but typically it gives you actually more relief. As an athlete in the state of relief, freedom, you perform better because there's no tension, right? So if you understand those mechanics. So in your own life, for everyday Joe Smo like us, like doing what we can to enhance our experience of life, it's like to see again, where are you holding on to stuff and using that as evidence as to why you can't be free, self-expressed, all the rest of it. So, but to go back to the original question, yes, everybody, every human I've ever encountered, and I obviously haven't quite spoken to every 8 billion yet, I'm working on it. But
you are working on it.
Getting close. Has these primary prisons. The question is through work, counseling, being part of my mastermind of freedom, having great friends who know how to listen, trials and tribulations, trauma that created awakening, your own intuition, sometimes just maturity, the older we get, is the degree to which you transcend constraints and understand them, find peace with your own feelings of inadequacy and get over it, or the degree to which some of them just are more definitive. We typically, even though there's 10, as far as I'm concerned, we got 2 or 3 that really are pivotal in our life right now. Like the feeling of not good enough truly is what defines that person to behaviorally compensate as a perfectionist, people pleaser, or work harder to make sure that you don't disappoint your father again. It's right, those kind of things. So everyone's got them. The difference with athletes is a very practical, again, way of looking at it is typically it was a kid who was given a tennis racket at age 3 or a golf club at age 4 or an American football when age 5. And they've done something for 20 years. And so, like I just had a meeting this morning with a guy who's a grown man and he works in technology and AI, but he grew up skiing. So for him, he's like, he even struggles to explain teaching friends how to ski because he does it unconsciously. That hierarchy of consciousness, right? Like we go from unconscious incompetence, meaning we've got blind spots, we're shit at something, but we don't know why. Then you become consciously competent, like, oh, and now I know why I have this reaction to someone, judging me, Then we become consciously competent, right? Like now so we became aware of our shortcomings and now we're working on overcoming them until eventually you become unconsciously competent. And so athletes are typically in the realm of unconsciously competent.
Yeah.
They just do stuff effortlessly. What I'm helping them do is remove the friction and the noise and the story of what happened, expectations, big contracts, multi-million dollars, wives, girlfriends, that I'm just moving that out of the way so they can do what they do effortlessly without thinking about it.
Yeah, so beautiful. And then you also mentioned saying how surrounding yourself with people that are listening to you and loving you and all of that. And I think there's also a call to action that's in the subtext, not even just subtext of your work, but in the subtext about if you're listening to this and you feel like you're working on all these things, expressing yourself wholly and contacting and connecting with the people and sharing your thoughts and dreams and hopes, then I think the other message that is in your work is really about how can we ask questions and listen better to people who are in our lives so that we're probing to say, how do you like to be loved, or how do you like to be connected with me?
Yeah.
And that's something that I've sort of gleaned from some of this work, and I've tried to become better at, living in a powerhouse female body that's like just going to be like, let's talk about all the things and I'm a blah, like the blurts that actually don't serve, I would say, sometimes male energies in my life, but also the blurts that are not serving the room by sitting back, being regulated. I've started to have this notion in my work about how do you show up in any environment? And yes, of course, it could be champagne, caviar, and your fancy dress, but that's not what this is about. But how do you show up in any environment, in any circumstance, perhaps even putting yourself in a circumstance safely in some way, but where you can be the most regulated person in the room? Yeah. And then that requires you to listen and connect and ask good questions. And I just feel like, I see that, the undertone of all that in your work. So it's.
Thank you. That's why I said, to me, being the most successful person is what you just sort of said in your own way. And I say being free and at peace. No matter what. Yeah. And I'm not saying that's an easy state to get to, but to me that is, if you want to call it heaven on earth or Satori or awakening or liberation, is like, no matter what, I have plenty of shit to deal with. I have stuff that I might subjectively say I don't want, but can I be with that? Can I be at peace with that no matter? And either I delegate or handle it or just get on with it or whatever, but most people are in a state of holding, resisting, avoiding, like they're just in this inner turmoil, which is dis-ease, right? So for me, again, it comes back to safety. At the beginning of all my live events when I speak, especially I have this series called Finding Freedom. And I will always say this space I want everybody to understand is a safe space where I want everybody to be seen, heard, and held. And that's the container of my membership, Freedom membership, like the number of people, because we have a feed apart from all my courses where people like, I've never been in such a safe, loving community. And
I saw one of your YouTube video that was your, in one of your containers, and there was a woman who was really like being open and honest, and you were honoring that, but you were a bit distant from her, and you were on stage, and there was a group, and then you said, hey, is everybody okay? Can people put their hands on her?
Yeah,
and I just
she's
thought,
talking about anger.
It's so lovely, because that's that oxytocin, that connection, that like you're not alone feeling is like, I think that was just so lovely to create that environment. So I wanna honor that you're doing that work, especially in a time where sometimes people are like, oh, touch is weird, and it's like to me it's a non-starter. It's like touch is not weird, touch is essential and natural. Absolutely, with consent and all the things that we're supposed to say. No,
that video was beautiful. I mean, for me, I have a decent following, but I'm not in the dizzy heights of millions of people. But
watch out, here it comes.
It's actually tracking quite quickly, but I think that had 3 million views in 36 hours. Because people resonate and they saw within themselves, which is the beauty of my work, is like, even in my mastermind, we can have hundreds of people from all around the world. I won't speak to everybody, but you vicariously get the same healing or freedom by virtue of who I'm talking to, because, okay, the details of the story, the uncle, the dad's name, the job that you do is different, but the underlying fear is identical. And as somebody lets go, then everybody else who's witnessing that gets the opportunity to do the same. So it's really beautiful.
Epic. I'm going to hit you with some quick fire questions and a reminder for everyone to be following you and checking out all your coursework. It's pretty epic.
Thank you.
So these are inspired by James Lipton and Billion de Couture. You know these? I was like,
I remember James Lipton. Was that Actors Studio? No, what was it?
The Actors Studio, it's the one time I've had the biggest fangirl moment of my life he's passed on now, but I lived in New York City for quite a number of years, and he came out of the Actors Studio green room door onto the streets of New York, and I was like, pulled my truck over on the curb so quickly that he was like startled, and I got out of the car and I was like, oh my God, James Lipton. And I came over, threw my arms around him, and I think he just was like, what just happened? Like,
he thought it was a hit and run about to happen.
Like every celebrity on the planet you could put in front of me, and I would never have had that reaction. And I loved him so much. And I've never done this on the podcast before, but for some reason I felt like This is the man I want to ask these questions
Okay.
to. It's a
Well,
little
I
bit of
don't recall
insight.
them, and I didn't do any research, so let's see what comes out.
They're quick and easy, I promise.
Yeah.
What is your favorite word?
Freedom.
What is your least favorite word?
I was going to say moist, just because
It is a kind of a terrible word, right?
I don't have anything with it, but it's just whenever it's heard, and the number of people say that's such a horrible word. So I'm speaking on behalf of the collective there.
Great.
The least favorite word might be hate.
Nice. What turns you on creatively, spiritually, or emotionally?
What turns me on?
Maybe it lights you up.
Yeah, I think just the gift of being alive. I'm here.
Yeah. Yeah. Killer.
Yeah, that's what I tell
what
my
turns you
friends,
on?
like, we're here, like, let's just be awesome.
Let's make it up like it's easy.
Yeah.
But sometimes I feel like I have to tell myself that.
Yeah.
What turns you off?
Meanness. People not being kind.
What's your favorite curse word?
Fuck.
What?
How did I say it? That's good.
No, it's fuck. What sound or noise do you love?
Children laughing in the distance. And it doesn't necessarily have to be distance, but like it's sort of going back to what we were talking about earlier. It's that uninhibited joy. That,
Almost like they don't know that you're witnessing them.
and
while
they don't
they're
know
playing.
why they can't express themselves fully yet. They haven't been told that that's bad, don't do this. They're just, just completely full self-expressed joy. And that could even include, other emotions. Like, it seems weird, but I remember, as a segue, I know this is quickfire, but
No, it's
I
fine.
was in a pub in England. I was at the time a trainer to a couple of celebs, and over there in London doing stuff at Pinewood Studios, and I was meeting up with some friends of mine from college. One of these girls that was a dear friend I'd had on a crush on forever, but never succeeded, but that was fine. Something I had to accept. But we became dear friends and love her to death. And she took a phone call. We were in a pub, 4 or 5 of us just getting together for lunch. And her whole face went kind of Ashton White gray, and she started bawling heavily. And she came off the phone, and it was her dad to tell her that his father, her grandfather, had just passed. And she clearly, like a lot of girls with grandfathers, that's that real safety, right? Like, you love your dad, but maybe it's not as safe as a grandpa. Anyway, it's all, you can see it all there. And it was just the floodgates opened. And I remember standing right opposite her, as I am to you. And it might seem weird, but I felt jealous. Not in a malicious way, but just as her ability to fully feel what she was feeling in that moment was so beautiful to witness. Because as I said earlier, it was really an expression of her depth of love for her grandpa. So even though I said kids laughing, I think there's something beautiful about just full, honest self-expression of whatever it is. But
Yeah.
we'll skew more towards laughter.
Landing. Yeah, laughter more than, What sound or noise do you hate?
What sound or noise do I hate? Well, being as I said, my least favorite word is hate. Maybe I can't resonate with that. I don't hate anything. I think all noises are appropriate, but I just think, to go back into that world of fragility, a dog or a child being harmed,
Yeah.
sort of speaks to that. Like, I really struggle with any form of abuse, especially to those that can't defend themselves.
Yeah.
Like, so whatever that might sound be, like that traumatic noise of someone really being hurt,
Yeah.
I have no space for.
What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
The first answer would have been a professional soccer player.
Nice.
Yeah,
Did you do
'cause
that
I
when you
was-
were younger?
Yeah, I was
Yeah, and you,
totally
like,
on track.
loved it, yeah.
Absolutely. I like to stay humble with it. I'm a good tennis player. I'm a decent skier, and I'm okay golfer. Like, I would never proclaim to be great, but I can compete. Maybe a better ping pong player than all of those. But soccer, I felt very confident had I kept going.
Yeah.
I got picked up for development by a professional team when I was younger. but I was so young, it's so hard to predict, you're 12, 13 and you're great. And then you mix with bigger kids at 16, 17, you're not so great. That I feel intuitively I could have turned pro. Yeah.
Nice. What about a profession that you'd never want to do?
I don't know, something to do with sewers. I don't know what the jobs are, but I never looked into it.
I think that's enough said. Yeah.
I mean, although I'm emptying the sewers of people's minds, I guess it's a much cleaner way to help remove garbage.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the final question is, if heaven exists, what would you like to hear God or the universe or whoever you subscribe to say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
You did good, kid.
I love it.
Proud of you. No, I mean, without sounding too philosophical, I'd like to say it's here. Heaven's here. And I do get to hear it every day with the amount of gratitude and love that people bring to me. And so God in multiple forms already saying thank you.
Amazing. In the present of now.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being here. I'm so grateful. I'm one of those voices that hopefully is landing with you to say, thank you for your work. It's changed me and the way that I think about life and the way that I move forward. So I appreciate you.
Thank you for having me. It's a beautiful conversation. I'm glad we got to connect.